the recording is on just so you're available. Thank you. Um, so as we go into this first step in the federal marketplace, there's a lot of stuff you need to know. And what I've tried to do is break down each of these steps with assessment questions that you can ask yourself about your company, about your knowledge of the marketplace, and then give you actionable items that you can do to help expand your knowledge. Today, what we're going to talk about is over here where you've got the red arrow, this do your market research and determine your target agency strategies. And the three areas under there that are mentioned, USA Spending, SAM.gov, and Federal Procurement Data System. I'm going to touch on each of those and give you a few pointers on some of the key data that I think is important. We'll walk through how to query some of this data very briefly. I have some guides, so I may refer you to those instead of going through those 100%, but they're out there. They're step-by-step screenshots, everything you need to know to get you to the point where we talk in the presentation today. But for each step in the 8 steps here, I have a breakdown like this so that you can ask yourself questions at each step, have actionable items that you can take with links to websites to expand your knowledge, help you find more information, or even articles that I've written about different things. Like you can see here, I have an article about prime and subcontractor roles and what you should know about each one. So you can make a wise choice as to whether or not you can see this. Is the presentation not showing? Oh my goodness. Thank you, William. It's one of those days today. I had a restart going on my thing there. Can everybody see it now? My apologies. Good Lord. I'm having one of those days, I tell you. It is one. Well, let's go back here so I can show you these 8 steps. So here's the 8 steps that I was talking about. And here's the mission and vision stuff. But let's just get to the important stuff. Here's the 8 steps that I was talking about. So I've got these 8 steps. Research the federal marketplace being the first, and then the assessment questions like I was talking about. Does the government buy what you sell? What agency is buying? What agency is funding? Who's your competition? On and on. And then again, these action items with anything that's underlined is a link to help you find that information, or an article that I've written, like I said, or a guide, or a website that gives you the data and information and walkthrough on that information and how to use it that you would need. So today, if you're here, you're likely here because you have a product or service that you want to sell to the government, and you don't know, one, if the government buys it, or who is doing the buying, or maybe even how much they buy. And a lot of people talk about, looking at the data, making sure you understand the data. I tell people this all the time, but there is a lot of data out there, and you can easily get lost in the whirlwind of data and not know what to do next. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk to you about the data, where to find some of this data, and I'm going to tell you the columns in the data and the data points that I think are the most important when you're starting out looking at the data to pay attention to. It doesn't mean that this gives you the full analysis, but it answers some of the questions, some of the basic questions that you're going to have in terms of what does this data mean to me. A lot of the terminology is stuff you'll have to get used to. There's glossaries and data directories out there at each of these sites that explain that. So I'm going to show you where to find all that as well. So there's a lot of data out there in terms of and information, right? There's 2 ways you can look at procurement data. You can look backwards, which is looking at USASpending.gov, Federal Procurement Data System, and SAM.gov data banks. This is where all the data lies for contract actions that have already occurred, already been awarded, may currently be active, or have been completed. USA Spending also includes some grants information and things like that, but primarily, for the topic of this conversation, we're going to be talking about contract information. Then there's also information that you can use looking forward to see what's coming up in terms of federal opportunities. So that's acquisition.gov procurement forecasts, acquisition gateway. That's data to look forward. SAM.gov is what's actually open and active right now. Everybody tells you to look at SAM.gov for what's open right now. That's the source, or there's lots of commercial tools you can use too. But we're going to talk about today the looking backward piece, because this is the part where you need to know if the government has a history of buying what you're trying to sell in order to know if this market is right for you, if it's even worth your time exploring spending money to get things lined up like capability statements and things like that, and the structure that you're going to need to put into place depending on the role you choose to have based on this data. So we're going to focus on this first. There'll be a future session where we're going to focus on the looking forward piece. But today we're just going to look at the backward piece, the historical data. So when we're looking at historical purchase data, there's three primary tools that people can use. One is USASpending.gov. This is a publicly accessible database that has all of the government spending data when it comes to loans, grants, and contracts. And it's broken out by recipient. And you can search on awards using a lot of filters. And I'm going to walk you through those today. The next one is SAM.gov. It has a data bank resource where they have standard contract reports. So if you're registered in SAM, you can access the data bank. If you're not registered in SAM, you won't be able to access the data bank. So that's one thing to know about the SAM.gov when we talk about it today is you must be registered or have an account with that system in order to access that data. And then the last one is the Federal Procurement Data System, or FPDS. It has an easy search function that I'm going to show you how it works. I think the easy search can be a little difficult at times, but I'm going to try to give you tips to keep it as easy as possible so you get the information you need, and explain how what you put in this Google-like search that it has can help you or hurt you when you're trying to make your search. So we're going to start with some first things first. Award data for actions that are funded by the Department of Defense and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are delayed 90 days in all data systems. That's because of the unique mission of the U.S. military. They don't want people to know if they're awarding a contract, let's say in a combat zone or a certain area where they have troops, that they don't want everybody to know. And they hold that data for, let's say, 90 days before they put it out to the public. That way, usually that effort has changed, troops have shifted, people have moved, and it alleviates a burden of concern on mission integrity. So all these systems, as you know, what we're going to look at, any data that you find or when you go out here and do these queries, it's always going to be at least 90 days behind for DoD. So what that means is, let's say, for example, the government's fiscal year ends on September 30th of this year. So all the data for FY 2024, which ends on September 30th, will not be publicly available in USA Spending until January 1st of 2025. That's what that means. So if you're looking for a complete full fiscal year accounting for FY 24, you'll have to wait 90 days to get it so that it includes the Department of Defense data. Also, awards made under the authority of FAR 6.302, which is urgent, unusual and compelling urgency. They have to be reported into the Federal Procurement Data System within 30 days of award. They don't happen necessarily automatically at the time they occur, just because we're in an unusual and compelling urgency situation, right? So the paperwork follows on those, just so you know. USASpending.gov, the financial data that is seen in here in terms of expended dollars and things like that against contracts is reported on a monthly basis. So that's updated on a monthly feed from agencies. And then each of these sites have user guides, data dictionaries, data disclosures, and glossaries of terms so that you can understand what each data point means, not just trying to assume based on a title. I wanted to point out that at my website, the first thing we're going to talk about is USASpending.gov, and I have a guide on how to set up simple filters and step through the process to create your own query in USASpending.gov. So I'm not going to get into all the guts of that. We're going to gloss over some of that in this presentation, but I wanted to point that out so that you can find it and read it at your leisure, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about today will also be in there. But that's a good downloadable reference for you. And USA Spending recently changed how it looks and feels, so I have updated that as well to make sure that that's all been taken into account in the guide. So can everybody see the presentation now? I see there's a few other things. I think we're in it now. Okay, great. So talking about USA spending, the things you need to consider when you're doing filters, there's a couple different ways to filter. A lot of people like to use keywords, and I think they're great to use. But the thing I would say with keywords in USA spending is you need to be very specific, because if you use terms that are general, like environmental, or let's say services, things like that, you're going to get everything that has the word services in there. You want to also be deliberate. You want to use terms that are very specific to the types of projects that you're interested in using, and don't necessarily use the keywords together. I would pick 3 to 5, and I would do them individually, and I would do them together if you're going to use keywords in the search, just because I think you can get a different mix of things. If you use too many keywords, you're going to get very few returns, and that's not what you want. You want to see and have the ability to validate relevancy of the projects and the contracts that are out there through a review of the description that is for that project, so that you don't cut yourself short. Or maybe it gives you some ideas of other things that you didn't realize the government buys that you could actually provide. So when it comes to keywords, I always caution people, I never start with keywords. I always end with keywords, as I need to refine data going in. But a lot of people will say start with keywords. I do the opposite, just because I like to start big and kind of narrow it down versus starting narrow. But you do you, right? Whatever works for you. When it comes to fiscal years that you should query, there were a lot of industries that were impacted by COVID in the 20 to 21 timeframe, where buys were less, or buys shifted a lot from one industry to another. We didn't see a lot in construction, and it shifted to a lot of services and health and human services type activities, a lot of supplies and purchase type activities. So if you're looking at those types of industries, you may want to look a little further back, like FY 2018 and 19, and then jump back to 22 and then 23 for looking at those types of industries that had a COVID impact. That way you're getting a more realistic view of what the government bought, not a skewed view during those years of COVID. For prime contractors, I always suggest that you look at least the last 3 fiscal years. The reason for that is because you can see what contracts are getting ready to expire, and you want to start looking at those agencies and maybe targeting your marketing 12 months or so out before the expiration date. So you'll see that if you look in the last 3 fiscal years. Typically, you'll see what's most relevant and getting ready to turn over. For subcontractors, you'll want to look at the current FY to date. The reason why you want to do that is because you're looking for things that have just been awarded that give you subcontract opportunities. So you want the most latest and greatest before a lot of the money's been spent, and you want to look at those types of opportunities. Here's a screen that just shows you some of the crazy filter considerations you have to make. A lot of people, I'm just going to point out the 3 that I think are most important here when you're looking. You'll see here on award type, you have contracts and you have contract IDVs. IDVs means indefinite delivery vehicles. Those are the big contracts where orders get issued off of them, and they run for like 5 years. So a lot of people will just hit contracts and not realize they're missing all these other pieces of information if they don't open up contract IDVs and select them. The reason I've only selected the 5 that are here is because the government doesn't use requirements contracts and definite quantity contracts extremely often. They will sometimes with products and things like that, but if you're a service provider, you're not going to see those there. So just, you can see here, open up some of these, play around with them, look at them and see what's there. That way you capture everything. If you only had hit contracts here and not this, you're only going to get definitive contracts. Definitive contracts means those are contracts that are for one project for one reason only. They don't cover, let's say, a contract that runs for 5 years and can be multiple projects and orders off of a contract. So you would miss that whole group of contracts, right? So open these up and don't be afraid to look at them and see what's there. Recipient type, for the example I'm going to use today, I'm going to be looking for women-owned small business awards, just because that's what I am. And you want to open each one of these and see what the significance is in each one. Like veteran-owned, when you open this up, it has service-disabled veteran-owned joint ventures, things like that. Minority-owned business, it goes through all the recognized minority and ethnical and cultural groups that are found under the minority business designation. So these find awards made to a single type. You can leave these blank and uncheck all of these to get all the awards. It won't differentiate if you just want to know who got everything. And then if you're looking just specific to a NAICS code, you may want to ratchet it down to a specific NAICS codes here. This does depend on your industry and the NAICS codes that are available in it. You notice that when you ratchet down here to a specific NAICS code, it also gives you the option to broaden it through the other hierarchies of the NAICS code. You can do that if you want, but if you know you're only interested in, like in this case, environmental consulting services, you can look at that. Again, here's some more filters, the types of set-asides. You can choose to look at these or not. In this case, I was looking what women-owned small businesses have been awarded under total small business set-asides. So, but you could leave these blank and you get all the awards. You could see who got an 8A award, who got a veteran award, those types of things, who might be a woman-owned business, but also a vet. And here's the results that you'll get when you look at once you run the query. And like I said, I'm skipping the whole query part because that's in the guide, because I wanted to jump to the meat of this, which is the data points. So when you get the results of a query, you're going to see it. You're going to have to scroll a little bit because they've changed the design of the screen. But you'll scroll down to the bottom of the results. First, you'll see a map, then you'll see a chart. A bar chart, and then you can scroll down and you'll see a table like this. And you can see that the contracts here come up to 1,341. And you might not be able to see it, but I can read it there. But IDVs, these are the ones, again, that have the contracts that run the longer period of time. You can click on this tab and it'll show you those. So, and if you want to see specific information on each of these, you can click on the prime award number, or if you want to see information about all the awards that this recipient has received, you can click on that. There are total obligations and total outlays, so you can see the amount of money that has been awarded. Obligations mean those are dollars that have been placed against the contract and are intended to be paid under that contract for services that are being performed. So that's real money on a contract, okay? Outlays are what has been paid, spent to date. Once you get the query, like I said, the guide shows you how to download a query of your documents. Once you've done the filter, you can share it to yourself. You can download it in a number of ways: PDF, CSV, which you can convert to an Excel file, or another number of ways. So I think you can put it into an Atom file too. But anyway, when you get that download, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see this big spreadsheet, and it goes on and on and on and on. I mean, we've got columns out to JZ. Okay, so all the way, hundreds of columns. Okay, what you're going to see is something like this. What I do, first of all, is I create a filter. If you don't know spreadsheets, take yourself a real quick tutorial on it because it will save you time here. But what you'll want to do is place a filter on your spreadsheet so that you can start filtering this information by column head as you start to look at it. You can take this data and you can sort it by how much money's been obligated. You can sort it by the period of performance, award data, things like that. And then we'll want to expand some of these columns, obviously, because they all come in the same size. So I always expand columns out so I can read the data a little bit better. But this is what it looks like when you get it. Lots of columns, very confusing, a lot of data. You don't know what it means to you. But the best thing to do is start with putting some filters on it. So now this is where I'm going to talk about USASpending.gov data and what data you should use. So you've got this big spreadsheet in front of you, and it's going to have, like I said, oodles and oodles of columns of data. So what you're going to want to do is decide, what answer are you trying to get and what columns best give you that answer. So for what I've found, here's a few of the questions. I've got like 9 of them here. I'm gonna give you kind of what I think are the hints to find the data the best. But the first question is the government buying what I'm selling? right? So in that big spreadsheet, there's 3 columns that I recommend people look at. The transaction description, that's what's going to get hit. One of the columns that will get hit when you use the keyword. It's going to pull in from that transaction description. That's going to tell you what was the title of that buy, what was being purchased. It's a very short description, but usually a summary enough that you can understand what was being purchased. There's also column CR and column CX. That's the PSC code for products, and also service codes, and then the NAICS code. So these 3 columns right here will tell you if the government is buying in your NAICS code or your PSC, and the description. This is where you can find out the closest as, is the government buying what I'm trying to sell? You can look at those 3 columns and get a good idea. So you can sort based on the NAICS code. You can sort, if you didn't filter on NAICS code, you can sort based on the NAICS code. Same with the PSC. The question is always, who's buying it then? If somebody's buying, who's doing the buying? Well, there's 3 columns that you'll want to look at here. There's the awarding agency, the awarding sub-agency, and the awarding office name. These are typically 3 different names, or they can be, these 2 could be the same if there's not a sub-agency and awarding office. So for example, it could be Department of Defense, it could be the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here, and it could be down here, it could be the Los Angeles district of the Army Corps of Engineers. So it drills it down for you as to who's doing the buying. This is where your contracting officer sits. So if you're trying to figure out what agency or what office to market to or talk to reach out to and say, hey, I'm a small business out here, I'm interested in doing some work, and try to start building a relationship, these are the offices, especially this awarding office name down here, when it drills down that far, these are the offices that you want to target with your contracting officers. But then there's also funding, and a lot of people don't look at the funding column. The funding column can tell you a couple of different things as well, and it tells you the funding agencies, the sub-agencies, and the funding office. Now, typically, whoever holds the money is who's going to be using whatever the product or services that's being purchased. So that's either the requiring activity, the one who's given the contracting officer the information they need to make the purchase, the people who are either going to oversee the work as it's being performed, or buying it for an end user, a different end user, if they do purchasing for another office. So this funding office, funding sub-agency, and agency is who your customer is, the end user or customer. This is, you also want to target marketing here if they're different from this other name, the awarding agency, because this gives you, again, the technical folks, the project people, the end user. These are the customers who you want to also get name recognition with, and see if you can find out more about those people and start building those relationships. So don't negate the funding column thinking, oh, it's just money. Not necessarily. Whoever holds the money is who's wanting the work, and those are important people also to get to know in federal marketplace. A couple more questions that the data can answer for you is, how is the government doing the buying? Well, there's 5 different columns here that kind of give you a picture of that. One is the award type. What type of award is it? Is it a purchase order? Is it a delivery order? That kind of tells you, is it a small buy, a big buy? The extent it was competed, it can tell you if it was set aside or not, if it was sole source or not, if it was done under a certain authority like unusual and compelling, like we talked about earlier. The solicitation procedures column will tell you all about how that was done, in terms of if it was an IDV, those types of things. And then, or competitive, excuse me, it can tell you if it's competitive acquisition, and that tells you a lot, because if it's sole source, that's something that, if you're a prime, well, you can't go after that. If it's competitive, you know that they'll probably put it out again competitive in the future if it's a recurring need. And you'll be able to tell if it's a recurring need if you see it over multiple fiscal years or in multiple periods of fiscal years. If you do multiple periods, let's say you do three years and then go back another 3 years, go back another 3 years. I don't think you have to do that. If you want to get deep in data, you can do that. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole with the data. So I always just tell people start with 3 years, but solicitation procedures will tell you a lot. Type of set aside, it'll tell you if it was set aside and how. Was it woman-owned small business set aside, an SDVOSB set aside? Was it an 8A? procurement, those types of things. And then column EF will tell you if it was considered a commercial item, procedures under FAR Part 12, which means, it's commercial off the shelf. You have limited clauses, things like that. Uh, who is your competition? That's another thing you can find out from this data. Who else is in the market right now getting these awards? You can find out who it is, where they're from, the congressional district they're in. So you can parse this out depending on if geographic location means something to you in terms of the type of work that you're doing. You can even find out the business size of the firm. There's several columns, GD through GV, tells you the type of firm, if they're a woman-owned small business, a veteran, etc. These columns are a little confusing because they have T's and F's in them. If it has a T in it, it means that type of that firm is that type of business. So if it has an F in it, it's not. So it'll say it'll be small business. It could have a T in it. It could be woman-owned. It could have a T in it. It could be woman-owned small business. It can have a T in it. If it has a service disabled veteran, it can have an F in it. So she's not a veteran, but she's a woman-owned small business. So you can see how it can get a little confusing, but you can parse it down to find those. Again, with the filters, run the filters and have it filter for just the trues or the falses, whichever one, and sort them so that you can see which ones are true. Who's your competitor, and by business size and type. And then column GW tells you if the contracting officer, how they have determined the business size, whether they're small or large. So that's how the contracting officer has made their determination and has coded it in terms of the awards, and how that goaling will also kind of play in there. If it's small, it'll trigger for a goaling on these other types of firms. Then there's location of the work. Sometimes this comes into play, especially if you're doing construction or types of services that are geographically, um, set up in terms of providing those types of services on site. You can find out the place of performance, the state of performance in the congressional district. If performance is done, services like professional services, it can be done at any location. Typically, these are going to match the recipient's state and congressional district because performance is at their location. But some of these you can find unique differences in that. There's also subcontracting opportunities. There's some columns that'll tell you whether or not there are opportunities. If you're a supplier, you can find out if the contract requires EPA designated products. You can then market to sell those products to the awardee, not even just for this, but maybe for even some of their other work. Column DO talks about subcontracting plans, whether or not a plan is required, and if it was an individual or commercial plan. That gives you an idea if a large business has a subcontracting plan, and they would probably need or be looking for suppliers, if not for this opportunity, others. And then also, again, that contracting officer determination of business size. A small business will not require a subcontracting plan, but again, it gives you an idea of businesses that maybe you could joint venture with or team with in the future that might have some opportunities there. Also, subcontracting opportunities are really important now with small businesses teaming with other similarly situated small businesses. The reason that's important is because similarly situated small businesses now can count a prime who, let's say, is a woman-owned small business who subs to another certified woman-owned small business, can count that subcontract dollars toward their limitation in subcontracting dollars. Where what that means is the government doesn't allow you under services, depends on the type of work, but particularly under services, to subcontract out more than 50% of that work. So that's what's important here when you're looking for sub and teaming opportunities. Award and end dates are important to know. You want to know when a contract started, because if it started recently, there might be some subcontracting opportunities or some opportunities to get in. You want to know when it ends currently. That'll tell you when the current order ends. And you want to know the potential end date. And the reason you want to know the potential end date is that can tell you if there's options available or option years available. That tells you when it really, really ends. So if we have a 5-year contract, the current end date may be 12 months from now, but the potential end date could be 3 years from now. That lets you know how much time is still available, that contract could still be alive. Same with the contract amount and funding. You can see the total dollars that have been put on an action, so you can see what's available. If it's small dollars, chances are that there may not be a lot of money available for subcontracting. So that gives you an idea of, is that something, it may be something you do, but is there an opportunity there if you're a subcontractor? Maybe, maybe not, or a supplier. Or is that the level or the size of dollar value that you're comfortable with as a prime going after? That lets you know that as well. Column M tells you the current total value of the award. That's the total amount of money that's been put against that contract for payment. And then there's potential total value. And again, what that tells you is if there's options that are left unexercised yet to be exercised by the government, what the potential is for future work that's still yet to come on that contract. And if there's a gap between this and this, you know that there's more to come. And maybe that means there's opportunities, right? Particularly in the subcontract arena. This also tells you, again, potential total value as a prime, how big that kind of work could go if you're going after work that's same or similar to that. I know this is a lot, and I'm kind of feeding you with a fire hose. But what you can do is, if you see as you're going through these columns and data, and you're like, "Wow, this sounds like something that sounds like for me. I'm really interested in something that looks like this contract." The very second to last column in the spreadsheet, JY, has a link to the USASpending.gov link for that individual contract record. And you can click that link and it will take you back to USA Spending, to that specific record for that specific action and that recipient. And it will show you a lot of other information. It'll show you expenditures by quarter. It'll show by month, by year. It'll show you sub awards that are valued at $30,000 or over, because that's the reporting requirement, and a lot of other details. It'll get into funding data details and things like that. So if you get curious about an individual record, you can always go back very quickly from the spreadsheet and find it. You don't have to go out there and try and type it in and find it through a filter search. So that's one thing I don't think people always realize. If you just scroll to the very end and you're curious, you can find some information. So that's wraps it up for USA Spending. That's a lot of information, but those 3 slides, how to answer your questions, I think are a little bit of gold, right? Because if you don't know what you're looking at in the data, those can at least give you a head start to try and figure out what the market looks like for you and what question you're trying to answer. The next tool that can be used is the Federal Procurement Data System, and it has what's called an easy search feature. The Federal Procurement Data System is really the authoritative source for all the data. Everything that's in USA Spending in terms of contract award data comes from FPDS. And FPDS is the system that contracting officers use when they award contracts. They have to code what's called a contract action report at the end of every award that puts in key data elements. And certain key data elements have to match. It's like a puzzle. There's a lot of if this, then this must be XYZ type thing. And sometimes those things, contracting officers go crazy this time of year because they're trying to code them, and sometimes it spits out and says, nope, you can't release your contract award until this is coded correctly. And you don't have the codes in here that match for what you're telling me you're trying to do. So these contract action reports are really key, and they feed this system. FPDS has an easy search FAQ here. If you go here, it gives you a list of all the data fields, and it tells you what the inputs could be for those data fields. You'll want to look at that first so that you have an idea of some of the terms that you may want to put into the easy search. That's the quickest way to make this easier than it is already. Now, some people think because this is a Google-like search, you can go in there and type, how many contracts have been awarded to WASBs in FY 2023? And I'm going to tell you, if you do that, that every word you type in now becomes a data search item. And so the word the will pull in everything. The word WASB will pull in everything. How will pull in every time that word how has been used. You don't want to type it like it's a question. Pick some data points out of this easy search FAQ and then type them in here. So for this query, what I was going to do is I want to know what awards have been made in FY 23. I want to know if they've been made to women-owned small businesses, and I want to know if they've been made under the NAICS code 541620, which is Environmental Consulting Services. I'm keeping it simple to start. You can always add elements after you get the initial results, and I'm show you how here. So this is what your initial results will look like. You can see it pops up results pages. We've got 2,243 results. That's a lot. And you can see our search terms right here. Like I said, if you had typed in that as a sentence, every word would be one of these search terms here. You can change them. You can take them off as you want to change the data. So that's fine. If you want to type it in like that and then slowly remove things, that's okay too. But this is where you'll see your search criteria. Automatically, it's going to pop up the top 10 departments who have awards, the top 10 contracting agency names, the top 10 businesses who have received awards, and the top 10 funding symbols. This doesn't matter to me for the purposes of what you want, probably the top 10 business names and these first three, right? So you can see here, you can sort the data by relevance. You can sort it ascending or descending, and you can pick the data element that you want to sort it on. There is a data dictionary out here that you can use. Again, it was on that home screen. It'll help you understand what each of these mean. You can sort this any way you want. You can also download this information into, again, a PDF, a CSV, or an Atom file. I like to download the data because to me it's easier to sort it in a Excel spreadsheet than it will ever be to look at here. But there is some real value to looking at it here. So I wanted to show you a few things we can do. But if you want to refine the data first a little bit more, you can use the advanced search feature, and then you can use the drop down menu and choose a field that you'd like to add some information on. Like for me, I wanted to know only those contracts. Let's say I want to add and only know those contracts that are IDVs. So indefinite delivery vehicles. So I would pick that, and I would using my easy search guide that I looked at before I ever started my search, I could see that IDC is one of the fields that is for this column, one of the codes. So I would put IDC in here, and I could click submit, and it would change all this, and then it would populate just to those indefinite contract vehicles. When I did that last night, it drops it down to 313. So you can see it culls it down a little bit more. Let's see. Heidi had a question. If you want to search by AI and FPDS, I'm assuming you could get results every time. There's a word that contains AI like in wait. Yes, it can do that too. So you have to be careful. That's why I always say look at that data, easy search, and the terms first, and try to pluck out of that, because then you know you're going to be using terms that the system will search on correctly. And then you can kind of start to refine it from there. When you pull it into an Excel file, you can sort on actual, quoted names and things like that. So good question, Heidi. Thank you. When you get into the area here now, you look at the individual records. A lot of people think, oh, I just want the large data. Actually, there's some really good information to be found if you just click on this view button here. It's right next to the first line for that contract number. If you click on view, it's going to take you to the individual record. And this is what that actual individual contract action report looks like that the contracting officer has to code. There's some gold information in here that you don't want to miss. So the first thing I'm going to point you to is here is the preparer's name. Guess who the preparer is? That's a contracting officer or contract specialist. Right here, you have their name, and look at that. You get their email address. Where are you going to get that? You're not going to get that anywhere else. That's not in USA Spending, right? This is where you will find it if you're interested in getting that information. You can use this, start sending people your capability statements, start doing some of the outreach and relationship building. This is where you'll find that information. This is gold right here. The next thing a lot of people say is, well, I'm interested in finding and looking at maybe old solicitations so I know what this person bid on and see if that's something that really does match something that I could do in the future or that I could sub on. Well, if you want to find solicitation documents used for the award, here's the solicitation number right here. You can go back out into SAM.gov and search in the contract opportunities using this number, but make sure you're clicking on the inactive button only when you do that search so that it comes up. Otherwise, if only active is showing, you're not going to get it. So make sure that you search on that. This again, you can go back and look and see what was put out on the street. Can I do it? Is that scope match something I could do in the future? The next piece of real good information here is this last date to order. You can see the first date to order was 2023. The last date is 2028. Wow, we've still got 4 years to go on that. That means there's opportunities here as a sub that you could, go out and reach out and talk to that prime. And guess how you can reach them? Right down here is their telephone number in their entity information. This is not always information you can find in SAM.gov. Okay. So this is, again, some of the gold that you can find looking at these individual reports. And then you can see here the total value. So this tells you how much opportunity is available under this BPA, $900,000. So again, good information to find. On this part of the individual car, I think the best thing to know here is if there's an order limit, what it is. This kind of gives you an idea of how much could be ordered at one particular time. So that gives you an idea of how much space there is possibly for subcontract opportunities, or if you're looking to maybe be a prime in the future, what the expectation would be in terms of the maximum order you could receive. And then here in the last part of the car, you can find out a little more of a description of the requirement. It is limited to 250 characters. Contracting officers try to keep it brief. You might not find much more here than you will in the title description, but it'll be close. It'll also give you the product service code. If you were only looking by NAICS, you can find the product service code up here. But the other thing it'll show you is if there is a subcontracting plan required down here and what type it would be if it's a large business. You can see in the gray here, it says small business. Small businesses don't have a requirement for those, but a large business would. So you can also verify there that a subcontracting plan is required. So there's some gold looking at these individual cars that you don't get pulled into the data dump when you dump it into the Excel file. So when you have some interesting information like that, you can find it. This is the dump when you do it into the CSV file. You can see there's an award type column here. There was a BPA blanket, FSS Federal Supply Schedule. That means it's an order off a GSA schedule. A delivery order, that means it's an order that was under the simplified acquisition threshold or against another contract vehicle that allows that. You can see the date it was signed. You can see the date it was actually advertised. You can see the contracting agency, again, the contract office. You can see the NAICS code. We sorted by NAICS, product and service, and you can see the ultimate parent name here. So the name. You're not going to get the description here. You're not going to get any of that stuff here. FPDS is much more truncated in the drop that it gives you. So just so you know that if you're looking for quick, dirty information to get to it really quick, FPDS may be your option or a better option than using USA Spending. Just depends on what type of information and questions you're trying to answer. So, and again, but this gives you the ability to look at that individual car. So if you see something that looks interesting, like it's in your back door, out your back door that you could provide at a certain location, well then, okay, Forest Service, Southwest region, hey, I sit there, I could provide services to the Forest Service. Let me go look at that individual car and open it up and see who that contracting officer is and give them a call and start building that relationship. So the data that you would use in that CSV export, again, these are the columns that I think are the most important: the type of award, the dollars obligated, the contracting agency and office name, and then the legal business name. Those are probably going to be the most key pieces of information that you can get out of that report. The individual car, here's the 4 biggest things I think you get. You get it, the contracting officer's name, who it was prepared by, the solicitation ID, so you can go back and look at what was proposed on, the winner's telephone number, so you can call and start marketing, and whether or not there's a subcontracting plan. So again, key pieces of information that can come out of the FPDS, either the large CSV export or the individual car. Now, I'm not going to tell you there's a lot of companies out there that do this, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, that can scrape this information for you as well. Now, the last one we're going to talk about really, really quick is SAM.gov data bank. SAM.gov, you have to be logged in to your SAM account to use the data bank, and they have 4 types of reports, static, standard, administrative, and ad hoc. Administrative is for government use only. You're not going to be able to access that. Static reports, I'll talk to you here in just a second about. So there's two static reports that I think are interesting that might be of use. There aren't as many reports in SAM.gov data bank as you would think that might be of help to contractors, only because a lot of them are out there so that government agencies can look and determine if they have errors in their reporting or not in a quicker fashion. It's a subset of FPDS. FPDS's reports that used to be there are now all in SAM for the government to use. So um, one of the static reports that I think is interesting in the small business goaling reports, this will tell you where the government is sitting in terms of its small business goaling as of a certain date. And then there's the top 100 contractors report. That tells you who the top 100 contractors are in terms of awards. You can parse it out by agency, et cetera. But you can take a look at that, and that gives you an idea of who the top awardees are. So you can target those as a subcontractor for primes, or you can pick a contractor out of that and then go look at their awards in USA Spending or something like that. You can do searches across these different tools using the data that you find in each. The standard reports that I think are the most interesting to contractors are who has a subcontracting plan. So if you're a small business and you're looking for subcontract opportunities, this is a great report. It tells you who has them. The total actions by NAICS code. This is if you're trying to just figure out how much is being awarded by NAICS. If you have a very narrow NAICS, this is good. Use that. If you have a more broad NAICS like management services or something like that, you're going to have to still start looking at those project descriptions. And then total actions by product or service code. Again, similar to the NAICS. The ad hoc reports, there is an award and IDV report there. That's basically kind of a dump like you get from FPDS or USA Spending, not as detailed, but you can parse it out again by agency, by date. You actually put actual dates in here, and I think I have a slide here that shows you that. But SAM has a lot of user guides for this, and here's the link for them. You can find and again, they're on the home page. You can type into the help user guides, and it will pop up the link for each of these reports. You can say user guides data bank. It'll pop it up. Some of them are pretty lengthy. Some are not as much. SAM.gov data bank also gives a good description. Well, I wouldn't say the best description, but it gives a description of what each of these reports includes, so that you understand. And again, in these reports, because they pull from FPDS, they're similar to the data that you would find in USA Spending. You're going to have that 90-day data delay for Department of Defense and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and a few other agencies like that. So just be prepared that these are also delayed reports. Same with FPDS Easy Search. The data is delayed there. You can see here's the descriptions that I was telling you that SAM gives you for these reports. So it tells you what it displays. Easy to find. And you can see here that you type in your own date range. Understand that the government's fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th of each year. And if you want to parse it out by organization, you can do that by typing in this block, and it will bring up organizations for you to choose from the drop down. You can also do it behind this as contracting office, but I think most people organization is good enough. And then you can hit execute, or you can export it to a PDF file as well. This is what it looks like when it comes up on the screen when you do the export. You can also, it's already got the filters in here, so you can filter directly. This one is filtered by total dollars, so I could see what NAICS category was receiving the most dollars from. This was Air Force that I did, so that I could see where is the Air Force spending its money. Well, it's spending it in these two NAICS, 33 and 54, right? And how much of that is commercial? Dollars, the total number of actions here in this first column that they've done. So you can see that they have 44, almost 45% total dollars in manufacturing, metals, machinery, et cetera, and almost 37% in professionals and scientific services. So That gives you an idea of where the money is being spent. If your NAICS falls down here toward the bottom, I'm not saying that 2 million isn't an opportunity, but there are other agencies that probably have a much higher percentage than 0.0019%. So those are the agencies you'd want to look for if you're more down here in the agricultural forestry type of area. So this gives you a quick way to find that information as well. Another quick resource to look at without going through a lot of filters and all those many data points that we talked about in USA Spending. So what if you're not good with data? Well, I would just say use the visual displays and graphs that USA Spending has available, because that's really important. They give you a lot there that you can use. You can scroll through those. They can give you a lot of quick information. You don't have to be a data guru to get a level of information that's helpful. There's also many commercial tools out there that will scrape USASpending.gov, FPDS, et cetera. They will pull out these contracting officers' names. They will pull out contract award dates. They will pull out all this stuff. They come with a price. Some are more expensive than others. The ones that I've seen that scrape this, probably the best and the most detail, run about $300 to $350 a month. That's not cheap, especially if you're starting out. So that's why it's important to understand that there's ways for you to find some of this data without having to pay that initially. Once you get going and you want to find that stuff faster and find those trends and find those relationships faster, great. But I've just given you some free and easy steps to do it. Does take some time, does take a little homework. Some evening when you've got some time, or you want to maybe talk to a friend, or maybe a couple of businesses pool in together and share your resources to do this, that might be partners one day. Build those relationships that way and share some services looking at some of this stuff. You can also hire a consultant to do market analysis. There are many consultants out there that will do federal market action plans for you. Well, they will go in, take keywords for you, go through this step and pull this data out and teach you what it is, teach you what it looks like, find you the target agencies. I have many of those support providers are on my website. I have a support provider page now where I list several reputable and reliable people that can do that. So that's another place that you can find that information. So there's a couple different ways to do it, but don't be there's some easy ways to here. Use these visuals and graphs. You don't always have to dig through the data to find a nugget of information that you need. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of quotes. One is, it's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. I have a lot of businesses that come to me and think the government buys something that they're trying to sell, but have no proof that that's the case. So just know the marketplace and know that the government's willing and is buying, and there is room in the competition pool for you before you start making a huge expenditure into the federal marketplace. It can be very costly to go out and get a GSA schedule because somebody has told you you should, and then find out that that market is saturated and that there isn't any room really for new entrants into that market. Second is, errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. Some data is better than no data. So even the data points that you can find and look at and understand is better than just winging it, right? And getting caught in this whirlwind and not know what to do. Now you have some targeted data points that you can look at and use to your benefit. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I know we're up at time, but I'd love to answer any questions. If anybody has any, you can take yourself off mute, I believe, or you can
Oh,
chat them. Hello.
hi, Shauna. Will you be sharing this presentation?
Yes, actually, this will be uploaded probably by the end of today or tomorrow onto the FedSubK in action page on my website. So the recording will be there. I am trying to find space to put the slides up for people as well. I should have that announced in the newsletter this coming month where those will be placed.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for the presentation.
Yo, you're welcome. If you haven't been out to FedSubK, here's a little bit about what it looks like. You can take a look. We have all sorts of things out there, including an events calendar, quick links, and a blog. Anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it, and I hope you were able to take away a little bit of a nugget today. of information. And if I can be of any help, here's how you can reach me and find more about the website and information. And again, this will be loaded up on the FedSubK in action page by the end of the day today. So everybody have a great day,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for joining.
Shauna, can I just say to the folks that if you wish to connect with me, you can connect on LinkedIn. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
sure.
I'll just put my LinkedIn in the chat if
Yeah,
that's
everybody feel free to share if you'd like to make connections. This is another way to do that.
thank you.
All right, everybody. I'm going to keep it open for a little while, but thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be hanging on the line for a little bit. And I appreciate you being here again. Everybody have a great rest of your day.